Hello, everybody. Welcome, Fat Dad Fishing Show. My name is Rich. I'm the host of the show. Normally, I am on with one or two co-hosts. We have Ed, who's the owner of Captain Hank's Tackle, and John, the owner of Creeley Custom Rods. And then we have a guest come on with us. Tonight's going to be a little bit different. Tonight is a topic that actually Adam, Helm, and I had talked about a few months ago. And for those of you that have been following, Adam has been on this live stream before. And it's a question that comes up on social media all the time, and it is probably one of the worst answered questions out there on the internet, and that is how do I pick a fishing kayak? And we have tonight with us three guests that are just going to be able to shed a lot of light on that, a lot of experience between these guys. So let me start bringing them on stream, and then we'll do the introductions. We have Adam Helm, who you should be familiar with. We have Rob English, who you should be familiar with, both previous guests. Then we have a new guest to the stream. We have Ed Hornsby. Guys, how you doing tonight?
Good.
Doing good.
Excellent. So we have normally we have guys that are in the Mid-Atlantic, New Jersey, New York, Delaware, Maryland area that are watching this stream, but this is one of those topics that really goes anywhere, and it goes saltwater and freshwater. And I know that we're going to have some people. I got a lot of messages today. Hey, I won't be able to catch it live, but I'm going to watch the replay. And these are people that are out, Adam, near you in California. Got one guy out in Oregon who's going to be looking. So want to make sure we go around the horn and let everyone give an introduction of themselves to the group so that everybody knows who the heck you are and why they might want to listen to you when it comes to this topic. So Adam, why don't we start off with you?
Cool. I've been a kayak fishing guide for a little over 10 years. I'm the general manager at Monterey Bay Kayaks. We're one of the largest program outfitters in the United States. I also started kayak fishing for beginners a couple of years ago, and we've almost hit 33,000 members. Also part of the pro staff team with Old Town Kayak and Canoe. I like fishing, and I fish a lot. I've also been a kayak instructor through the ACA as well for about 8 years now. So I do a lot of instruction on kayaks, both sit inside and sit on tops.
Awesome. And let's go down. Ed, you're next in the circle here. You want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, man. So I'm on the Gulf Coast here in Mississippi. I'm sure this is a new range for you guys, but I've been doing kayak fishing for, I don't know, almost 2 decades, starting with just hopping in, figuring it out. About 4 or 5 years ago, I had the opportunity to switch from what I was doing to actually work at and manage a kayak shop locally here. So the idea of starting it out and, what are people looking for? What's the safe option, the good option, is something that we really, really focus on. Fair bit of tournament fishing locally, tapped into offshore fishing, not just the inshore stuff, probably 6-8 years ago. Absolutely addicted to that. Just bigger, better, longer has always been, a good push and an enjoyment. But, also on the retail side, it's, finding something somebody's going to use, and that's the big push. We have an indoor pool at the shop, so I can put you in it. If you want to stand and sight cast fish, we can start right there with, can you stand in this boat? So, that's about it. And just love being on the water every chance I get.
That's awesome. So, lots of experience so far. And then Rob, why don't you introduce yourself?
Rob English. Going on to my 6th year now, maybe 7th year kayak fishing. Currently a team member for Wilderness Systems Kayaks. Do a lot of, up in the Northeast, so do a lot of inshore back bay fishing, a lot of striped bass fishing river stuff in the middle of the night in the dark.
Right. Yeah. For people that haven't followed Rob on, you can see his Instagram handle right there. I'd suggest it, and it is a lot of night fishing, a lot of night kayak fishing, and you're also a photographer, so it's awesome pictures all the time. Even though I think a lot of them you're pulling off the videos, but you also have some friends that are just as skilled as you with the drone shots and everything like that.
Yeah,
the overhead from the
helps.
bridges. Yeah, definitely
helps.
So, and then for those that are not aware of me, I've been fishing for, I've been kayak fishing saltwater exclusively for over 20 years. I started with my brother's sit-in kayak. That was an adventure. And then fished for long time with sit on tops, and just upgraded a couple of years ago after I sold my boat. And I'm exclusively kayak fishing unless somebody invites me to go out on their boat or we're heading offshore. And we don't have mothership trips around us like you get in some of the other areas for the offshore kayak fishing. So that's kind of where I stand. So a lot of experience, but I don't have the experience on the technical side like a couple of you do. And I do want to mention, though, before we really dive in, just so that everyone's aware, we do have, as Rob mentioned, we do have pro staff on here for Wilderness Systems with Rob, and then Adam, you are also for Old Town. And then Ed, are you for anything pro staff?
No,
Okay.
I keep it open, but in all honesty, I've fished a Hobie for probably the past 5 years.
Yep. And
that's,
and I am not pro staff for anything. So you're going to get a really good range of things. And it is also by design that we have an Old Town, a Wilderness, and a guy who fishes a lot of Hobies and also sells a ton of other brands so that you can get all of the different perspectives as we go in here, and we can get the most value out of this for people. So as we jump right in here, I'm going to just kind of start this off, and I'm going to bring it back to one of the things that Adam had mentioned. He runs the Kayak Fishing for Beginners group on Facebook, over 30,000 people on there. And probably the most asked question is, I have X number of dollars. What kayak should I get? And it's probably, I don't want to bash people because I tend to do the same thing and I have to force myself not to, but you get a whole lot of buy this one, buy the Old Town, buy the Hobie, buy the Wilderness, buy the Hoodoo, buy the Ascend. And if you look at the people that say it, they all own that exact one. So it's only natural, right? You want to recommend the one that you have because it probably, especially if you're a serious kayak fisherman, is the best for you. And you've done a good job choosing it and you're very happy with your choice, but that's not necessarily the right answer. So Adam, why don't you kick it off and just, what are some of the other considerations? What's the real question that needs to be asked, or what are the questions that the person that wants to respond should be asking before they throw out the name of a kayak to recommend?
Yeah, it's like one of the most frustrating things is to hear people like, I have $200. What kind of kayak should I get? And they just leave it at that. I think like the first things that should be asked are, where are you fishing? Lakes, rivers, streams, ocean. On top of that, what are you targeting? How big of a person you are. That plays into a lot of kayaks. I mean, if you're a bigger guy, there's a lot of kayaks that you shouldn't be even sitting in. I think, more information is needed to help. So that's a good place to start.
Yeah. Ed, are there any questions that you typically ask? I assume that when you're in the shop during the day, you just have people come in and, they have that look in their eye and they're wanting to walk out with something. What are the questions that you're asking them?
So we, especially with the market now, the big thing is if we're talking fishing specific, the questions are pedal or paddle. And do you want to stand and sight cast? So being as close to Louisiana, as much marshes and, just solid conditions and small tides we have on the Gulf here, standing and sight casting reds or just being able to stand and cast is a big conversation for us because they've seen a YouTube video and they're like, well, I want to do that. And I'm like, all right, well, and then like Adam said there, we have to balance, your stature against the model that you're thinking you want and the amount of money that you thought you were going to spend. Anybody that's in this understands that what they thought they were going to spend is not what they ended up doing. But there are plenty of balances, models, sizes, you got to make a sacrifice. You should own 3 kayaks and nobody wants to buy 3 kayaks. So,
it's funny you mentioned that because, Rob, I think you actually do own 3 right now. Is that correct?
I have two right now. I have one more on the way. Should be here in June. One's a pedal, one's a paddle, and then one set up with a torpedo for doing long distance and going out front and doing a little bit inshore fishing, like 2 miles, 3 miles out. It's like it gets sort of. It's like it was when you had golf, like your fishing poles. You had fishing poles like golf clubs. Now I get kayaks like golf clubs, one for each certain thing you're going to do for that day.
Yep.
Yeah. Rob is one of the guys that I'm jealous of because he always puts this, and again, the great photography. So he always puts up these beautiful pictures of these new kayaks on that beautiful truck that he has. And I get jealous and I'm like, why can't I have 3? And, I won't tell my wife and she doesn't watch this, so I'm safe.
And if you're to pick up, you can get 3 used ones for the price of 1 brand new one too. If you want to go that way, that's it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's something I want to talk about a little bit later. The consideration after we go through some of the other stuff. What are the considerations for buying a used kayak? Because it's not as easy as a lot of people think. And there's some things that you really need to consider and look at when you're talking about that. But let's talk really basic. So we're talking tonight exclusively fishing kayaks, right? So now it can be freshwater, it can be saltwater. I'm always going to come at it predominantly from the saltwater side because that's where I've done 99% of my kayaking and kayak fishing. But let's start with it. Sit in versus sit on top. What are the considerations that you would mention in that? Ed, you want to start with that one?
I mean, my first question is, are you serious about fishing? Because your limitation for a sit inside is just going to be huge in that market of accessories and making it do what you want to do. Now, if you want to, paddle 8-9 miles to some kind of barrier island and set up shop and you just want to bring a pole and fish and hang out, awesome. You're going to cross that open water. You need a good kayak that's going to do it, get a good glide. But ultimately, for most people, when they've been, thinking about it and digging into it, sit on top's just going to give you more versatility to do that job when it comes down to it.
Yeah, Adam, what's your thought on that? Your shop, you rent both. Is that correct?
We rent both. We teach out of both, and we all guide out of both. So it's a mix. But I mean, just like Ed said, I mean, for me, it's more of a safety concern. I mean, sit insides are great for their purpose, but they're not stable for sitting around doing nothing. They have a purpose to move forward and to cover distance. I mean, they do have bulkheads and stuff like that, but your odds of capsizing are 10 times higher. And getting back in the kayak is 10 times harder. So there's just a lot more things at play there. So the sit on tops, just like Ed said, it just depends on how serious of a kayaker you are. And a lot of guys come in wanting what we call the recreational style with the giant cockpit, which I think are even more dangerous than a sit inside kayak, just because now you have a larger volume and most of those don't have bulkheads. So you have to add, flotation bags and stuff like that. I mean, it just doesn't seem safe. And honestly, a lot of them are around the same price to start with in an open deck. So why would, maybe not something best to consider as a sit inside. Right.
Rob, do you have any experience with the sit inside?
I have just from doing like river trips and stuff, but as far as where I fish at, anybody that is either in one or asks about them, do not recommend at all because we're fishing tidal waters, jet ski traffic, boat traffic. Guys are getting swamped in their bass john boats and stuff, so sitting kayaks are even worse than to be in. We had one guy on the river, I remember, he was out fishing, had a big striper with treble hooks on a plug, pulled it into a sit-on kayak. Fish started jumping around. He got hooked in the arm. So he's hooked in the arm, hooked in the fish, and he can't paddle, screaming for help from the jet ski guys. It's just, people see the things that we do and like, oh, I'm going to go out and do that. And don't realize what could happen from that. You don't think, oh, I'm going to get stuck with a treble hook in my arm. Or you don't think past just going out and catching fish.
Yeah, and I fish the same waters that Rob fishes, and I can say from personal experience, using my brother's sit-in way back in the day, they will get swamped by the boats because the boats don't slow down, or they slow down just enough to push the biggest wake possible. And I give them credit because they think they're helping, but I'm just speed up. You see a 55-foot Viking coming in the inlet and they slow down. You're like, no, just hammer that thing.
And it comes a lot to experience. I mean, there's a lot of really experienced guides out there that are in sit insides and they're pulling in 200-pound bluefin tuna. Yeah. But I think when people see those videos, they need to understand that these guys are extremely experienced, and most of the people that are asking about what kind of kayak I should get are usually the beginner crowd. So I mean, it's those guys that know what they want are going to go for what they want, and if you don't know and you're asking that question, it's best to side on the side of safety and get a sit on top, nice stable kayak.
Yeah. So I think we have the consensus because this is geared towards people that are looking for a fishing kayak. A lot of them are going to be beginners, at least to the kayak fishing game. I think it's appropriate to say that everybody here recommends your first step is a sit on top.
And the reason for that is, and for people that don't know, the reason is that you sit in kayak, it's just your water goes in. The sit on tops, they all have the scupper holes, so water comes in and can go back out again. You will have water coming in all the time while you're fishing, but it always goes in and out, in and out.
Right.
As long as your hatches are nice and sealed, which you have to check, make sure they're sealed tightly, you're always good.
Yeah, working with customers that do sit insides, say they're not fishing, I always recommend you need to start, in your intro ACA class. We have an instructor locally. I suggest, you have a lot of questions that are going to be answered when you get with an instructor and do a hands-on and walk through this stuff. Adam mentioned the recreational sit insides, and some include bulkheads, some don't. The better the price point, the less the material. And you're going to see that. And it's going to fill up, and it's going to go nose down. And a jet skier is not going to know what to do with you other than yeah, man, we can leave this here. You want to ride? That's, and that's the same thing the Coast Guard will do. They're not obligated to rescue that boat. They're there for your life.
Yeah, I can tell you, I was fishing, and again, Rob fishes this inlet quite often, Absecon Inlet, and I was out there in my kayak, and there's some guys went off of the beach, and they went around the jetty to the inlet and got pushed out. They were on surfboards, and they couldn't get back in, and watched the rescue go on, and I'll be damned, they left the surfboard, and the guy was not happy. The other guy went out to try to get it, and he got it, and he was able to make it back in. But yeah, they did not care. It was simple. And they went out in the boat too. They could have just lifted the surfboard out, and they were like, not doing it. And he was coming in not happy, but he was lucky. His friend, who didn't try to fight the inlet currents, just went right back around the jetty and landed as normal, was able to get it for him. So that's not their concern. They don't really care about that. The only time that they really care about is when you're leaking gasoline. And then they'll get somebody out there to get it, but then you have to pay for the recovery. So, all right. So now one of the bigged things is the question of the propulsion, right? So you have the paddle kayaks, you have the pedal kayaks, and then you have the trolling motorized, or even some gas motors on the kayaks. So let's talk a little bit about that. Can you talk about some of the considerations that somebody that's new to the game should have when they're trying to figure out, do they want the pedal, and I'm not talking different types of pedals, just a pedal in general versus a pedal and a trolling motor. Adam, you want to take that one?
I am a kayaker first and a fisherman second, even though I've been fishing my entire life. I truly believe that everyone should be starting on a paddle kayak. You're going to learn everything that you need to know, whether it's bracing, it's actually how to use the paddle, make sure it's not right upside down, or, understand the catch, understand the release, just really understand how to use the kayak without that drive. And I think a lot of people miss that if they just go straight to the drive. And then when that drive fails, they really have no idea how to actually kayak. And drives do fail. I mean, there's none that are 100% proof. I mean, drives fail. So, I think it's important that everyone starts at the paddle kayak. To learn those basics on how to actually kayak before they just go straight to a pedal drive.
Yeah, it's an important point. It's not a boat. It's not just going to float there for you. There's a lot that goes into navigating with a kayak, even the most stable ones. Rob, what's your thought on that?
For me, where I fish, it's constant current. The pedal kayak or the motor is the only way I can fish. The amount of time I would spend trying to stay where I need to be with a paddle compared to fishing, especially at night. And we're on fishing bridges, piers. You're bouncing all over the place. I need to be going pedaling backwards, forwards, backwards, forwards. I just bought a paddle kayak for doing lakes, more slower water, where you can kind of just paddle to where you want to fish at, relax, do your casts. But for where the title stuff that we do, it just doesn't work for me at all. Same with if I'm going 2 miles offshore, 3 miles offshore, we're fishing wrecks. You're trying to stay over those same spots. Paddle is just another thing that gets in my way. But I did learn getting the right size paddles makes a huge difference for when those drives don't work or you do have to paddle. Because you buy any random paddle, if it's too short and you're in a 36-inch wide kayak, you're hitting the sides. You got to make sure you have the right paddle for you for that boat.
Right. You're out there
Not
with a
just
240 and you need a 270 or something.
Not just something you have because, oh, well, I need a paddle just to launch the kayak. But what happens when you're 2 miles out and you got to paddle back?
Right. And that's always what worries me when I go offshore, because I know I can make it. But boy, I don't have the paddle that I really want if I have to pull that drive up and I have to paddle all the way back in.
Yep.
Ed, what's your thought on that?
That's the balance, man. Again, we don't have crazy tides down here. And it's what you're fishing. I love the ability to hold spot with a pedal drive. I haven't put an anchor trolley on a kayak in, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, just because I haven't needed it anymore. But just balancing that position is great, but it's a cross. There's a guy I know in South Louisiana. He doesn't do pedals. It's all paddle and it's stand up because they're going 100 yards into the marsh and then done. So for us, it's really, really based on what you want to do with it. That paddle link thing is a big conversation. A free paddle is just that. It's a free paddle. Okay, so it came with the kayak, but it is usually not the length you need. Having a conversation, figuring out what length paddle you need. Never thought we'd be selling a ton of 270s, adjustables up to 260s. But the reality is if you're in something that is, I think 39 is about where it gets now currently in a sit on top pedal drive kayak, a 240 won't cut it. But a 240 has been a standard for a pedal kayak for a long time. In the past 3 years, though, and I've had guys that are like, well, what's cheapest? I'm like, okay, have you ever paddled this thing? Go paddle it. Come back. We'll talk again. Because like you said, Rich, I don't want to have to use that paddle, but there's so many choices out there to get the paddle that will work. Whether you go lighter, just make sure the length is right. 100%. Right. The length is where it needs to be. So...
Yeah, I've got the adjustable, but it's a cheap one, and it's what's it, an Accent? It's like $120 paddle. It's adjustable, and 2 years now it now doesn't lock. So my adjustable up to 270, I actually have Gorilla Tape on the thing until I replace it, so that I can lock it into position at 270 when I'm out there. Yeah, but that's not a great paddle. It's not a good paddle. I've used it extensively, especially in North Carolina when you're going across flats and you have to pull up the drive. We'll talk about why I have to pull up the drive. It's deep enough, but I can't use it in the flats in Pamlico Sound for a reason that we'll talk about. But I've gone miles with it. I'm just not the biggest fan of it. It's not the right paddle, even though it's the right length. So let's talk about that. So when would you then recommend somebody as a beginner to get a trolling motor on theirs? Adam's smiling, so let's let him go last. Let's let Rob go, because again, Rob, you're great in this conversation because your conditions are, well, I guess they're all very varied, but we're in the area that has the absolute strongest currents out of the three, I believe. Especially, I mean, the Gulf, you're not going to get nearly what we have when you're pushing, an inlet on a spring tide. You could have a 4-knot, 5-knot current coming through there, 4 mile an hour, 5 mile an hour current.
I just last year got a Torpedo for mine, the 1403. I bought that just because I wanted something so I could do more exploration and get more time in from when I launch to my launch. I'll have to go maybe 3-4 miles before I can even start fishing. So this gives me the opportunity just to get there a little quicker, having to worry about fighting the winds in your face, the tides in your face. I mean, it's for somebody to just start on that. I would, especially in our waters, it would be a little tougher because you don't understand how the kayak works yet. You don't know turning in this way, turning that way. It's how you're going to get into an eddy. It's going to spin you around in a circle real quick, and the currents and stuff. It's better. A pedal drive is always the best to start with for before you get the motor. I would think, and then you could. What we're doing with the Recons now, we're doing the two setups. So we can have a setup with your motor or your pedal drive,
Right.
Which is nice. You just change your rudder out, but yeah, for where we're at, it's better to starting with a pedal drive. Plus, you want to get used to it before you spend $2,500 on a motor and flip a brand new kayak and sink everything, lose your battery, or God knows what else would happen to the damn thing.
Oh God, losing a battery. A 100 amp hour lithium battery at $600 to $1,000. Yeah.
I was watching Jeff Little do a flip with his and had the battery on and everything, went right over upside down with it and just to do like a recovery thing. I was like, I couldn't imagine doing that.
Yeah, that takes some stones.
Yeah.
That takes some stones. Ed, what are you thinking about somebody that walks in and says, "Hey, I got $4,000. I want to never had a kayak. Let's take a look at the ones with the trolling motors."
The best phrase I can tell you comes across the board. I can tell the guys that have never paddled before they pedaled, and I can tell the guys that have never pedaled or paddled before they motored. It's like you said, it changes the dynamic. You're going to get into a kayak that you don't understand. You're going to put now up to a 3 horsepower motor electric on the back with $1,000 in power and motor and batteries and dump it because you don't understand the way the kayak works. You don't understand the waters you're fishing. Generally, luckily, a lot of our customer base that I work with, we don't start there. Like, hey, I want to motorize it. But okay, cool. Like, here's the models that either have a motor. So Old Town specifically, we work with them. You know, if you're trying to go MK106, awesome. It's already done. You'll figure it out. It's stable, you know, or the autopilots from those guys. But usually if they're starting out, they got a paddle kayak and now they want to motorize it. So it's very limited to the guys that are running in, but you already know that they're just trying to stay out of buying a John boat. They want to get a kayak up front and they want to motorize it. And nothing, there's no balance for not having time in the seat. Time in the seat is the biggest thing you can do in any of these. So we get the questions and I generally try and be like, okay, well, why are we looking for a motor? Well, I want to go 8 miles. Well, how long have you been in a kayak? This is my first one. Cool. What PFD are you going to get? Well, I was thinking, I wasn't sure if I was going to, all right, cool. You need to, let's step back. You have some really lofty goals. I never thought I would fish a tournament in the Bahamas or go to South Florida and fish for a sailfish tournament. I never imagined that 10, 15, 18 years ago. But you can't just be like, this is, I'm joining Olympics tomorrow. I got this. You got to find a balance and you got to grow into it. So we try and balance it out. I mean, we're retail, you know, if you're going to be safe, I'm going to sell it to you, but I'm going to express that you need to spend time without this guy without this motor, because just like a drive, you're going to paddle this one day. You will have to paddle it. And if your paddle is too short and it's upside down and it weighs 15 pounds, I hope you got a radio, because you're not, you know, we have low tides. You guys up there, you know, you're not paddling a barge with a dead motor anywheres, you know, in the tidal swings that you guys have. So I hope you got an anchor trolley, but that's terrible too. So
I've seen people try to, you know, I don't want to bash them, but the Old Town AP, man, it's not easy to paddle those things. I've never done it. I have talked to a guy who paddled his around just to play with it. He's like, oh my God, if I ever get stuck. So he's hoping he was hoping that he never ever would get stuck, and he's just putting a lot into that Minn Kota motor there. Adam, your thought on this? I'm pretty sure I know it. Yeah, why don't you share that with everyone?
I actually really like what Ed said. You know, I think there's a place for it, but jumping straight into that game, and we get that in our shop all the time. Like, hey, I want this just so I could put this motor on it. Will this motor work? Is what they ask me, and it's just like, I don't know. I mean, I have no idea if that motor will work on that kayak. And a lot of these guys that do go that route, they're usually coming back within the first few weeks being like, all right, I'm ready to listen now. What can I do? because they get frustrated and then they realize it's a lot more than what they took on. And I think it's something that you could build up to, and they have their place. But to start out with that, I think it gets a lot of people in trouble. They're just not quite ready for it. But I mean, our area where I fish is a lot different from where you guys are fishing. One is we don't have access to, boat launches and ramps everywhere. Most of our stuff's some, rock launches or beach launches, and you start adding, drives and batteries. And I mean, that's the biggest pain in the butt. And then you got to launch through some surf, and I mean, heavier kayak through surf, and you can't have the drive in the water because you'll destroy it. I mean, then you got to paddle this 200-pound kayak, and it's basically like a slug going through the surf. I mean, I have multiple kayaks all for different things. And, there's areas here where I'm lowering kayaks down off of cliffs with a rope. I mean, I can't do that with a battery powered or, even a pedal drive for that matter.
Right.
I think they have their place. But I think it's something that they need to learn how to kayak first and do everything else before they're just putting a motor on a boat. Not to mention, I don't know how it is where you guys live, but I mean, you got to register it here and deal with the DMV here. So
yeah, so
we do.
Yeah,
you do have to register. Yeah,
it's a lot of work. And I mean, at least 2 or 3 times I've been a couple miles offshore where a guy just waving me down, and I go over there and his electric drive has failed, and he doesn't know they want me to test their battery and stuff, and I just hook him up automatically and just start towing him back. And they had no paddle. Both of those instances, they had no paddle in that electric drive motor, and they're miles offshore. Yeah, I think, there's a time and a place for them. And I think just being prepared for everything. If you got that down, you should be fine.
Yeah. My own thought on it is I wouldn't start on it. They do perform differently when they're under power than they do when they're under paddle or pedal. And they get tippy quick. Mm-hmm. I mean, you just lean a little, you're going faster. It doesn't take as much of a lean to get something to bite and to just kind of throw the weight just, a couple of inches and you could be over. With that said, in our area, there's a huge use for them. Like you mentioned, Adam, we're launching in the backwaters quite often or on the inside of an inlet. And, I'll just use Hereford Inlet as an example. It's not incredibly wide, and you can get some really ripping currents. And man, I could tell you, I would love to have a trolling motor sometimes just to get across that, because even if you're just crossing it to fish the rocks, it's going to sweep you so far out towards the outside of the inlet that you got to then work your way back up the rocks by the time you get over. And I'm doing that with the pedal drive. So it's a pain in the neck. Now I happen to like it, so I'm good with it. I'm good at getting that current and then just coming right back in against it, but it's not for everybody. But you do have to be careful with it, I think. And I wouldn't recommend anyone go straight to it. I would recommend people consider the pedal kayaks, especially in our area. It's a little bit more, it's more forgiving. Go ahead.
One of the things that I still do now, because I'm waiting for my pedal drive kayak to come in the Recon. So I've been using the Torpedo and the Radar, and all the time I'm fishing, and then my steering's on my feet, so I can steer with my feet, and even though the motor is off, I'm still moving my feet trying to use the rudder, but it doesn't do anything. There's no rudder there anymore because you just have a motor. So it's when you're running, unless you're under power, you're not moving anything. You can't move side to side. You can't move anywhere. You're just in the current rolling around. That's one of the biggest things that I'm still trying to stop myself from doing because it's not doing anything.
Right. That's a good point. I didn't even think about that. What about, let's say, the people that had the paddle kayaks and they want to put a rudder on it? I mean, what's the case for that? I don't quite understand that unless you're doing like what Rob is saying, where you're stationary or using it to position the nose in the current. Maybe Ed or Adam, you have some insight in that. I see people all the time. I'm putting a rudder on it. I'm thinking, why? You're paddling.
So the opening conversation that we always have is it's $200 to $300. So could you sell your kayak and upgrade to something that's a little longer, a little sleeker? It's just gonna, track better, or are you trying to compensate for something that you're not noticing by putting $200 to $300 of equipment on a kayak that, you know, you're drifting? You can put a paddle under your arm and affect your drift to make that kayak swing and hold, and you have a paddle already. And I'm sure Adam sees it all the time when they're like, this thing won't go straight. I was like, well, it's 9 feet. I don't know what you want it to do, but it does circles great. It's very maneuverable. Doesn't track well.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about, so I think we're at the point where, okay, so Adam, I do understand your point about the paddle before anything, because you gain a lot, even if you don't realize it, by using a paddle kayak. I mean, you learn the balance, you learn a lot about how they perform and how they track and so on. Let's talk about people that have a little experience. Is it a consensus, or am I just guessing here? Am I off base that for the most part, the pedal kayak is probably the best for somebody who's serious about kayak fishing and they have enough water to use the drives?
I think so.
Yeah.
At least for us up here in the Northeast. We have we have the beach, we have this inlets to launch off of, we have the boat ramps to launch of. Even if there's a boat ramp that you have to pay for, there's usually a kayak launch dirt spot next to that. And we have to cover a lot of, like we said, you're usually covering a good amount of water before you even start fishing some of these places.
Right. Right. And now, Adam, you have the special circumstance. You're not going to drop a 30-pound drive down the side of a cliff, or you're not going to pull that out over the rocks. That's absolutely understandable. But for the most part, do you find that for fishing, the pedal kayaks are better suited to fishing than the paddle?
Yeah. I mean, 100%. If I have the chance to take my pedal drive out over my other kayaks, yeah, I'll take the pedal drive out almost every time. The comfortability, the sitting higher up on the water, they're drier, well, depending on what brand you have. But I mean, they're hands down, if like you're a serious kayaker, yeah, you'll get into the pedal drives for sure.
Okay.
And they have their pros and cons. I mean, like every kayak. But yeah, I'm in mine whenever I get the chance to, for sure.
Okay. And Ed, I'm assuming you're in agreement with that?
Yeah, it's just, we talk larger muscle groups, less fatigue, relatively hands-free. Just steering fish out of structure is outstanding. So yeah, I mean, if you're serious about it, and we have that conversation all the time. I'm like, how serious are you? Because if you've been talking about a pedal drive and you're just not, you think you need to ease in, I'm like, give it 6 months, you're going to lose $300 and you'll be back next year and you'll be buying a pedal drive. So Let's take our time and settle into it, because that's where you're going to be.
Yeah. Even from like a guide standpoint, I deal with snags all day long. So, I mean, that drive makes a huge difference of getting snags out compared to trying to paddle upwind, get it out from underneath the rock type of thing. The drive makes guiding so much easier.
It's funny. We did a discussion on one of these streams about tog fishing. And for those that aren't aware of what a tog is, it's also called a blackfish. And it is heavy structure, rocks and wrecks. Yep. And the worst part about it for me is when you go on a boat, you're anchored up, because you have to anchor over the structure for the most part. You don't have to do that in a kayak if you have the pedals or even a trolling motor. But man, you're going to get snagged. And as our one co-host says, if you ain't snagged, you ain't tog fishing. Well,
exactly.
I don't lose a lot of rigs or a lot of jigs when I'm in the kayak, because I'll get snagged and I'll just pedal forward and I'll go to the other side and I'll test that side and I'll test the other side. This past weekend, I must have been snagged 30 times, and I literally left with the same jig that I had on in the morning. Now I had to cut the leader a few times and shorten it, but that is one huge benefit, and a huge benefit, I think, of the pedal, because of one important thing. You're using heavier lines. And think about this. And in my mind, I'm always thinking about stuff like this, because if you've ever tipped, you've ever lost anything, that's always in the back of your mind. When you're snagged in an inlet and you have 40 pounds pulling you on your rod and you're trying to get that snag off, it's going to shift your weight. It's going to shift your balance. Now with a pedal kayak, you can immediately alleviate all that pressure and you just pedal. There's no pressure on the line anymore. There's nothing pulling you to the side, pulling you forward, pulling you back, whatever. So that's something for people to keep in mind as well, is that extra mobility that you have, and the fact that you can keep your hands on the rod, you can work the drag, you can release the bail if that's what you need to do. That can also be important. That's another thing that I always think about personally. And maybe I'm just some kind of mental case about that kind of stuff, but I've been close to tipping with big fish. And, because I let myself turn too far, or I let it pull me broadside rather than getting the nose of the kayak closer to it, so it's kind of, you get that Nantucket sleigh ride when it's pulling you forward, but then when it cuts behind you and now you're spinning, well, now you got the whole bow coming across and it's slowing you down. So that's another thing. But there's a big topic with the drives, and this is probably where we might get some arguments, which I'm fine with. You've got the prop drive and you've got the fin drives. And I will say, I'm going to start this one off with a very general statement on it. And this usually comes down to a wilderness / Old Town versus Hobie discussion, because those are probably the bigger of the brands that use the two different types. I'm going to say this. There are certain places in the country where I would not go with the prop drive. And there are certain places in the country where I will not go with the fin drive. And there are certain types of fishing that one is clearly superior over the other and vice versa. And it's all about what are you going to do the most of, because you ain't going to have the perfect world out of either of the two. So I'll leave it at that, and I'll add a little bit later. Why don't we start, Rob, with you? What's your thought on it? And I'm not asking what you're using right now. I know what you're using right now, but what's your thought on the fins and the prop drives, and when you would suggest people look at either one of them?
I've done both. I haven't done the new fin drives where you can pull the cords for reverse. For what I do with fishing bridges, fishing jetties, lots of rocks and lots of the inlets and stuff, what I like is the prop drive, because it's one less thing I have to worry about. I can pedal forward, I can pedal backwards, forwards, backwards. I don't, to pull the cords to go back and forth, which is another thing. We're usually fishing heavy currents. A lot of times by myself at night in the dark. I'm in the bridges. I'm in the sides of the bridges. It's just, I want to be able to just control everything right then and there and not to worry about pulling something or doing something like that. My pedal drive, if I get in the shallow water, I can pop it up and I can draft pretty good, skinny water with it. With the fins, when I had those, it was nice to be able to just do the little fluttery thing, which is nice. If you're doing really, really, really thin water, you do a little flutter. But if you hit a rock or something, you're gonna rip that damn thing right off.
Right.
So if you're fishing real shallow water, once again, have a good paddle, put the drive up, or put the fins up, and just start paddling through that stuff.
Yeah. Ed, what's your thought? You're in a whole different type of world than we are.
Yes.
So I'm guessing you're going to go the other direction.
Well, I use the boat that's comfortable. Aside of the drive, I'm going to tell you, it's very neutral. Bottom line, fins perform better in shallow water because I don't have to change my cockpit space. I just flip them up and go. But you don't have the reverse. You don't have the instant reverse. You have to rely on muscle memory and timing to be able to flip those fins and go. If I'm in super shallow water, the drive needs to be up, because regardless of what drive it is, if you get pushed backwards and you settle into it in the mud or on an oyster or I have stood in my kayak and ripped my drive out of a crab pot because it's shallow. It's in the mud. It's buried. I did get a sheep's head out of it, so we'll go from there. But the reality is, if I'm that shallow, though, I'm standing and sight casting. I'm looking for clean water. So I want the drive out of my way regardless. we did run into something, and I'm sure there's differing opinions on this. Speed is pretty much about the same across the board. I do feel the fin drive has more torque on it.
Yeah.
Long story short, me and a buddy, we are 8 miles south of a barrier island here. We have a huge headwind. We are facing west-northwest to travel north-northwest. We're looking left and we're sliding to the right. And at a regular pace, you know, he was like, man, he's like, what are you doing? I was like, nothing. I said, I'm not going any faster than I was earlier, and I'm pulling away in a fin drive. He was in a SP13, so a Native Slayer Propel 13. It's a slender boat. It's a great pedal drive model. It's not overly built. It's not overly heavy, and he couldn't hold it. We do deal with some heavy tides and some spots in Louisiana where I should be doing 4.5 miles an hour, and I'm doing 0.1. And I can tell you the propeller feels like it's slipping a little bit. Big picture, that's not where everybody's at. You know, Rob, Adam, Rich, you know, you guys have been doing this enough. You've been into specific things, certain environments, and you know what's going to work. Choked up, hydrilla we get into that. I can stomp a fin drive through it. You cannot pedal a propeller through it, period. It's 4 feet deep, but stomping that drive through it's not the best idea. You're going to get wore out. Stand up, sit down, paddle. Just paddle it. So I'm pretty indifferent. I do like the fins because I can stop at my shop at 2 a.m. and grab whatever I trashed yesterday. So that's a special case. I understand that. Yeah. But I can usually ring across the country and get parts because Hobie drives break. Those fin drives get smoked and smashed, but I can get the parts. And that for me is a big thing. If I'm in South Florida and I need, you know, bearings or a lower assembly for a drive, it's generally not as accessible as the fins. So for me doing more off-grid stuff, it has been more efficient. But it's, you know, like I said, shallow water versus instant reverse. That's the conversation we have in the shop. What's more important to you? And then we work from there. The last question I ever answer is the boat that I'm in. Because they're like, oh, well, I saw that picture. I need that. I'm like, that was a 16-mile round trip. That's not what you're into tomorrow. Like, right, that's watching weather for a week. So it's what you need it for. You know, you guys have seen it. If some of you have used other drives, you get it. So I'm on the fence. It's what's going to work best for you and your environment is what I prefer somebody to push into. So,
gotcha. Adam, where are you coming in on this? With and yours again are mostly surf launches.
You know, surf launches and, you know, getting pushed backwards if that fin drives down, like they already said, you know, you're doing some damage pretty quick. And a lot of people think that they're just going to power through the surf, but a wave will pick you up and throw you backwards pretty quick. So I like both. You know, I obviously am a little bit biased. I you know, the Old Town pedal drive, I've tried them all. For me, it comes down to reliability. And the, you know, especially with the Old Town pedal drive, I mean, it's reliable. I mean, my drive's going on 3 years and probably, you know, thousands of hours. I've never had to do anything to it other than replace the
shear pin.
But
yes, I haven't done anything on mine at all.
Yeah, but you know, guys on the water with Hobie, they got, you know, they have a bag with like an extra chain and they got zip ties, and there's a bunch of YouTube videos of how to fix things with zip ties, and but they also have their place. You know, I've paddled an Outback, and I love that thing. That thing was fast. It was really stable, a lot easier to get back into than anything else. And they sit a lot lower in the water, a lot better for rougher conditions. You know, I think they all have their play. But yeah, I mean, we don't deal with like what you guys are dealing with, marshes, and you know, once we're out here, you know, our water is 52 degrees, 50 degrees. It's cold. We get big swell. You know, a lot of guys here are running both. I would say it's like 50-50, and I like them both. I mean, I have nothing bad to say about Hobie. I just think that when it comes down to the reliability of the drive, that's where I'm at. And the, you know, the Old Town drive is just pretty freaking awesome when it comes to reliability. I think that I've done the side by side with some of the Old Towns and the Hobies, and to me, it felt like the Hobies were faster. I don't know if they actually were, but it felt a lot faster. But then I just got one of the salties, and the salties is really fast.
That's faster. Yeah,
it's faster. But now you're getting.
I think it comes down to the guys too. Like I said, I fish with guys that fish in Hobies, and we both come through Manasquan Inlet against the tide, which you're pedaling or you're pushing as hard as fast as you can go, and you're going nowhere. You're just getting inch by inch by inch by inch.
Right.
But so if you're out, we fish multiple times a week, and we can push those things hard.
Right.
It's a lot easier for us to push them harder than the average person. That just
and I mean the whole design will, you can max out. There's no such thing as the whole design is only going to allow you to go so fast. Which is like why the salty's different. I mean, your salty's a lot skinnier and has a lot more rocker, so it's allowing a little bit more speed than those wide old pounder Obies. So again, there's so much more at play than just the drive. I mean, the design of the kayak, how high you sit compared to how low you sit. I mean, there's just so much to play into it rather than just the drive.
Yeah,
exactly.
I'll say this from fishing. I fish Pamlico Sound once a year, and for those that don't know, it's basically behind the Outer Banks of North Carolina, and it's a lot of grass flats. And I cannot use my drive in a lot of it because it's the propeller, and it'll just get chewed up. Well, first of all, I don't want to kill the grass flats by chewing them up, but it'll just get caught in there. Then you got to pop the thing up. You got to unwind it, and if I was going to use a drive there, I would definitely be using the fin drives with the kick up fins so that I could do the little flutter kicks. Do want to point out though, for people, you should try them. You should try both because there is a difference in motion. The pedal drives, it's kind of, they're not the same. You have the fins are basically a step motion. It's just straight forward, straight back type of a step. Whereas you have the prop drives, it's like a bicycle. So you go forward, you just pedal like a bicycle in a circle. And for those that may have knee or hip issues, it can make a big difference. For me personally, I don't have any problems with my knees or my hips. For some reason, when I use a fin drive, it hurts. After about an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, it starts to hurt. And it doesn't make any sense, but I can literally pedal 10-hour days constantly, over 20 miles in a day on the drive that I have now, the prop drive, and it doesn't bother me. And it's not that it's superior, it's just works for me. So you should go out there and don't just pedal in a circle and come back. Give it a little bit of a go, pedal it around as much as you can before you really make that decision. Because if you get one that's wrong, you're done.
Yeah. Also, too, good. Like with said, you guys had the shops and stuff. Sorry, is showing people where to position the seats and position the pedals and stuff on the kayaks too, because you don't want to overextend your knees. You gotta if you push your knees too far, you're gonna do more damage on your knees, and never have it. It's like a bicycle. You never want your legs extended all the way out. There's a bit more wear and tear on your body.
So what we get into a lot also recently, because there's so many models of pedal drives, I find that some people's discomfort is the motion can definitely do it, but your sit position. So I'm seeing a lot of higher and higher seats in the propeller drive models, which is getting our ankles and our hips a little better. And out back, your feet are higher than your hips. That can put a lot of pressure, on your lower back and your hips and stuff like that. But you don't have a lot of options in that brand until we go all the way to a pro angler. Even a salty that you guys mentioned, that sit position is a lot higher. Your native propel is a lot higher. And I'm seeing that more and more in the industry. And I find that some people, it's just being crunched in that seat that is causing them a little more discomfort, because now we're lifting our feet up and we're putting that weight backwards. And then I would say I've got probably 2 good buddies with knee surgeries. One's up to 3 replacements, and the fin drive seems to be nicer on knee problems. And I think it's just because we're not getting that lift and down. We're just push. So sometimes that's a factor, and that's, we rent kayaks, we rent, pedal drive fishing kayaks, and we have a pool in the building. And I'm like, you need to sit in that and rent that, because you're going to spend more than you planned on. And the last thing I want you to do is buy something that's just going to sit there because it hurts to use, and renting. That's the thing. Like I said, don't go do a circle. You need to put a mile on it, put a couple hours in it, feel where you're at. So
you should know within a mile. You should know within a mile, I would think, if you're what it's going to do as far as, is it going to hurt? Is it going to bother you or not? But it's a good point that you brought up about the seat position, and one that I haven't thought about. The higher versus the lower. Fat guys like me, we want a higher seat, so we're not like pedaling our knees into our gut. But you also want a comfortable seat in these things too, and I think people kind of don't really think about that quite as often as they should. So get the full experience, get on the water, sit in it, pedal it around, and ask yourself, if you go for 2 hours at a time, can I sit here for 2 hours? Yeah. And if you go for 10 to 12 hours, like I do, can I literally sit in this for 10 to 12 hours? And
lumbar support's nice too.
Yes.
Like lumbar support. I just got a lumbar support pillow for mine. It makes a huge difference just getting that, so you're not just slouching. You gotta put you up and get you a little more up straight, which is nice.
Well, it's funny, like on all the platforms you'll hear, I have this back injury or this knee injury, or I have this and this one's the best for it. We're all built completely different. I mean, just because it works for me, it doesn't mean it's going to work for you. So I mean, and I think that point of being, you got a demo. I mean, that's the best answer I see on the platforms, is just go try out different kayaks. And if you're entry level and you got $200 to spend and you have to buy a cheap one, obviously you don't really need to be demoing much. Just get whatever you can afford. But if you're really looking to get into it and spending hours and hours on fishing, you got to try out different ones, because you might get one and be pissed off a week later because it hurts. You just got to try them out.
Yeah, I was out with. Go ahead, Rob.
That's one thing I'm trying to do in getting the guide thing going on this year down here. I'm in the wildernesses. We have a lot of guys on Hobies, and one thing I want to push is for newer guys, just go take a trip, get in a kayak. It's loaded up, it's set up. Go out with somebody who knows what they're doing. Get you going. You can try wilderness one day, try a Hobie that day, and see what you like before you can really get into it and buy it. Understand how it's going to be out in the currents.
Yeah, it's it's funny, as I'm about to say this in the chat. Billy, who I went fishing with last year, he rented a Hobie and gave that a go. I've been trying to get him to spend some money and buy a fishing kayak, and I don't have him quite there yet. But he went on the Hobie and found that full day fishing, so it was a good 8 hours, and it was just not the one for him. And he knew it pretty quick. Pretty quick within the first hour. And I think the motion just wasn't good for his legs, even though he did stick it out the entire day. But that's not the correct motion for him. And he never, ever would have known that if he hadn't just said, let me just rent the Hobie and give it a go for the day. But there's another part of this. So you can talk about the drives and the fin drives and the prop drives. But the other thing that you see, and again, I'm going to bring it back to the kayak fishing for beginners and Adam. The other thing that I always see is, I weigh this or that, I'm this tall. What kayak can I stand in? And really, that's not really maybe that's the question they're asking, but what they're really asking about is stability. But stability means a lot of different things. It's not just whether you can stand in something, because you can stand in a lot of things. I can stand in mine, and it's a quote unquote stable kayak, but that doesn't mean that it's the most stable kayak out there. So Adam, you want to talk a little bit about stability and things that people need to consider about that when they're looking at the kayaks?
Yeah, stability is in my world, and California and stuff, ocean fishing, you're not standing anyways. Good luck. I don't care what kind of kayak you have. You're not standing in 20-foot swell or 5-foot wind chop or whatever. You're just not standing. So I mean, we're sitting constantly. But someone wants to come and go bass fishing, and you really play in, height has a lot to do with it. Weight has a lot to do with it. Getting from that sitting to standing position has a lot to do with it. That's why there's a lot of these pull straps and how to get up to stand up. There's just so much involved. And, I know, like, to the bass fishing world, standing up's a big thing. And peeing is a big thing. A lot of people are like, oh, I just want to stand up so I can pee off the side. And it's like, good luck. Yeah, it's a lot harder than it sounds.
Yeah.
But I mean, to a certain extent, I mean, I don't have that much knowledge on that. And, Ed might have more knowledge where he's at, but we're not standing on kayaks where we're at. It's just not a feasible thing. I don't feel like dumping everything into the water. So
yeah. Now, Ed, you are standing, and that's a very big part of your fishing down there.
Yeah, it's the big push is sight casting, whether it's on the bass side for guys, which I have absolutely no background or knowledge for, but the saltwater game. I have buddies. I've got a good friend who he prefers to stand. If it's flat, doesn't matter what he's fishing for. He's finesse jigging a point of grass and he's standing because he just wants to stand. That comes into play, but like you said, that approach, like, oh, I want to be able to stand in it. It's like, well, why? Yeah. What do you want to do? If you just want to be able to piss off the side, okay, let's talk about that. Let's find another direction because, I have a great kayak here for you. It's 12 feet long. It's 41 inches wide. Its primary stability outweighs every other feature about it. You can sit off the side, whatever you want to do.
Yeah. We have a special guest.
You're not paddling in the wind. You're
Right.
going to put a motor on. So it's what do you want to do and where you want to get into, because like Adam said there, it's not. I mean, we spend some time out of Florida, offshore. We've done some South Florida stuff, and it's just why do you're going to be wet all day anyways. Get over it. Use the surf to your advantage. Take care of that then.
Like, South Florida, that water's warm too, right? I mean, we don't want to be falling in 50-degree water over here. So
yeah. Right. Exactly. Yeah. We don't. Yeah. I mean, it gets too hot. Literally, just get out of the kayak.
Right.
Like, what are you doing? Oh, I'm hot. The bite's garbage. I'm just gonna get out, hang out for a minute, get back in. That's probably not the thing you guys get into up there. Either direction. But yeah, it's you just got to find the balance, man. That kayak that I can guarantee you can stand in that. You're probably not going to enjoy it. It's too bulky. I fish out of 12 foot long by 34 inches wide. I have stood offshore in 3-foot rollers. Granted, they're like 10 seconds, so you just ease in with it. And it was for a picture. I'm throwing a topwater plug that I didn't cut off.
Exactly.
And it's a cool picture, but it's not, what am I going to do if I hook up to a bonita? If I didn't adjust my drag, I'm going straight out because there's no balance. I'm already using everything I can. So it's finding out what you need, man. And everybody's different. Yep. Like you said, everybody's different. I have great stability for standing in kayaks. I've got a skinny sit on top. I call it prairie dogging. We just stand up, sight the pond, sit back down, but there's no way I could set a hook in it. But it's finding a balance. Find out, you need that stability that works the best for you. And then, let's not sacrifice absolutely every other feature of that hull for that primary stability, because you're not going to do it in current. You're not going to do it in surf.
Right.
You're going to limit your abilities and your future growth of what you want to do in that kayak industry.
Yeah. So I'll say, I can stand in mine. I have a big water, an Old Town big water, so it's the same hull as the Predator. I can stand in that. I've stood in Raritan Bay. I've stood offshore, but I don't stand when I fish because there's too much current. There's too much wave. And I don't want to go in the water. And I can stand, but the stability of my kayak, that kayak's not made for standing. Just because you can doesn't mean that it's made for it. If you really insist on standing and fishing all day and you have to get an Old Town, get the 120. Yeah. That's going to be much more stable for that. But this thing can punch the surf. This thing can really get through the currents. And for my money, I believe it to be more stable in those types of conditions than something like the 120, which is more of like what I call a plow bow. It's kind of pushing the water aside, whereas this thing is literally going through it, and the waves break over the front and go through the cockpit and out the scuppers. It's a whole different type of stability. And again, I never stand in the thing, even though I can, just because it's not what I do with it. It's not the way that I do it. I never stand at night ever. And I'll say that it's my channel. I can say this. If you have to stand to piss and you're in the Northeast or you're in Louisiana, you're not dressed properly. You should be able to work something out, male or female, that you can very discreetly go wherever you are. You know, I go with guys who are like, I'm going to go over here. And then they're standing up. And you just see their head above the other side of the marsh. You're like, dude, I just went. Yeah, you were 30 feet from me. You didn't know. So, anyway, it's a whole different type of stability to me. It's nice to be able to stand. I can stand in now wilderness. I've never tried to stand in. I've only been in a wilderness once, and it was for a little test thing, just because the guy with me wanted to test mine and I wanted to test his, and we just did circles in the basin. But I stood in Hobies, I've stood in Old Towns, but to me, I've stood in ocean kayaks too, which is not easy to stand in those, the older ones that I used to have, because they had all the little they were the paddle ones. They had all the little foot grooves in them. But I don't know.
The thing
stability
is,
to me means something different.
Yeah, the kayak can be, like we said, we do it all the time. We take great photos with our drones and everything, standing up, casting, fishing, makes great photos. You can do it in that, but why are you doing that? Also, like with me, I grew up racing dirt bikes. I grew up skateboarding, snowboarding. I can stand on one foot, put it up this way around my back. Like, it's like you have that stability. Just because you can stand in a kayak doesn't mean you have the balance to stand in a kayak.
Right.
Like if you don't have good balance, it doesn't matter how stable the kayak is, you're still going to go over.
Well, and that's, I mean, even here, I do a lot of bass fishing on stand-up paddleboards. I've done halibut fishing on stand-up paddleboards. Yeah. I mean, you learn. I mean, the best way to learn is honestly take out a stand-up paddleboard. If you want to think you could stand on something, go rent a paddleboard for the day.
Yep.
But yeah, no, it's just different for everyone.
I'll stay sitting.
Yes. So paddleboards is what I prefer to do if I'm recreationally paddling now, because I have extra going on in the back of my head, because I'd rather just be fishing. Yeah. And if we're just paddling something and I'm on a board, I have that extra, like, don't fall in. Like, is that too shallow? Yeah. Don't hit that. But we'll do rivers and creeks and float on paddleboards, and I've fished on them. I really enjoy fly fishing off of a paddleboard because I don't have a drive in my way, or rod holders or all the other stuff. It's great to not have all that. But yeah, that balance can be built. Figure it out.
Yeah. I fished with a guy named Mike. This guy stands in the middle of the inlets all the time. And he revealed a few weeks ago, I don't even think that he realizes that he's doing it. He's just so into the fishing. He'll just be right up against the rocks on a jetty in an inlet with the tide ripping through, and he'll just hook a tog. And next thing you know, he's standing and he's running to the front. And then he's on one foot and he's steering his trolling motor with his left foot while he's leaning over with his right. That has to be learned, because that is and my buddy Ed and I just look at him, we're like, what the hell is he doing? I don't even know if he realizes just what it looks like, but he does say, don't anyone ever do what I do.
He's an acrobat in his younger years.
Yeah, he's going to end up now. Luckily, it's a very quick swim to get out of there, but over to the rocks and the beach there. But still, it's a big difference. But I also like, the other part of stability is, how is it in the currents? And when you hit the currents, especially around bridges, I do a lot of bridge fishing. Rob, I know you do a ton of bridge fishing, probably 2 to 3 times more than I do, and I consider myself somebody who does more than most. The currents and the way that they can hit that bow and they can spin you off of there, that really that can really disrupt the stability of it. In any,
you get. I'll be pedaling somewhere. It's 20 foot, all of a sudden drops down to 40, and as soon as you hit that 40, you go sideways. You need, like, over time you learn those spots where you can do that stuff at. When you have winds blowing this way, tide's coming in. Like, I'm fishing up against the railings on the bridges, and I know you gotta be on top of it all the time. Like, you gotta always be cautious, because you can get spun sideways going to that bridge, and it'll roll you right over if you're not paying attention. So you learn your areas where they're going to kick you at, because you're going to get kicked around all the time.
Yeah.
No matter what it is, and just sometimes it's nice, sometimes it's a little harder, some a little heavier. I do it by myself at night, which is probably crazy, but it's just I've learned it over time how to do that.
Yeah, bridge fishing at night is by yourself is a little concerning. I'm not saying I don't do it. I do, but I pick the bridges also. I'm not doing the bridges right at the inlet. I'm doing the ones that are, in the middle of the backwaters around here, guys, for those that aren't aware, the barrier islands of New Jersey, they all have these causeways that run in. They have nice, really good fishable bridges there. So you're always, within earshot of somebody. As long as you have your PFD on, it's well lit. The bridges are, at least, and there's usually within, where I fish, 30 yards, you're in knee deep water, so you can get out of there. But those currents will knock you around. I was out Sunday, and I got the I'm sitting in the eddy behind the big bridge pilings, and I'm dropping for Tog, and once you know, the wind is kicking the one way, and the bow got caught. It immediately spun it. The rudder hits the piling behind me, and now I'm really swinging fast, and that's where the stability. Maybe this isn't the perfect kayak if you're going to do that, but it whipped me around real quick, and you're going to love the stability at that point of these kayaks, and that's where I made sure that I got my center of gravity right where it needed to be to adjust for that push against the waves and so on.
You got to be able to. You got to just. You
got to be able to
panic.
move.
You can't panic. You just got to go with it, fish, move around with the kayak. And I said that's what you do. Getting a kayak with a motor and just going taking off, you don't get used to that. How's it going to push me this way? How's it going to push me that way? You need to learn how to ride it. It's like anything else, like a bike. You need to know what it's going to do in certain situations.
It goes back to Adam's point: paddle before you pedal. Because if I hadn't had 20 years of paddle experience and learning how to take the less stable kayaks through everything, I mean, that wouldn't have been a natural adjustment for me. And that happened within like 2 seconds. I mean, I was spun 180 and right up against the barnacles of that bridge within seconds. And, within a second, 2 seconds, I'm literally facing the other way. Everything has shifted. Rods are flying around in the rod holders, and it's just kind of mayhem. But there wasn't for me because I was used to it. I was like, okay. And I just kind of got myself stable, and I just kind of went with it. And, I didn't waggle. I wasn't going to go over. But I could see a lot of people going over in that kind of situation.
And if you had a nice Tog on, and then you get wrapped up in the props and the drives, like there's just so many little things you got to always be prepared for.
Yeah.
One thing we haven't mentioned either is, I mean, I see people get their own line wrapped up in their drives all the time.
Oh,
If you can't be able to handle that at the same time of being in one of those situations that you're talking about, I mean, you're along for the ride.
Yep.
Yeah, it's not always a fun ride at all. At all.
Well, and just learning that kayak. So like something Adam mentioned way earlier was, about how bracing with a paddle. That's a foreign term for, I'd say, 90% of my clientele. They're like, I'm like, oh, well, look, if you're really worried about it, just keep your paddle in your lap. Well, why? I have a pedal drive. Well, your pedal drive is not going to prevent you from flipping that boat. But if you know how to properly use that paddle, you can use that stick to keep you, upright in so many more. Because, how do I roll this kayak? Let's learn how to not roll it. And then, because that's, you need to practice that. You need to get with somebody and learn that technique and, not drown yourself because you want to do an Eskimo roll. Learn to brace with your paddle, kind of thing. But like you said, if you hadn't been in that situation before or experienced how that kayak reacts and handles for you, you would have probably freaked out. And most people overcorrect. They go off the other side.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you guys have dumped gear. It took me a while, but I've definitely put one upside down and, still don't discuss the material values of what went in. Slowly replaced it, but it sometimes I know a lot of us, it just takes that, you have to have that scare, in best case, you come out great, and you learn from it. But that's something that all these people, everybody can learn from, is people who have done it. And I can tell you, you fish in the surf, Adam gets this, you will dump in the surf.
Oh yeah.
you're going to dump in the surf. It took me 4 years to do it in Florida because it's nothing of surf, but I did it. It's the same day I dumped the boat because it had water in it. And I came back in and I got lazy. I didn't want to pump that water out when I got to the surf. I was like, I'm done here. I lost gear. I don't want to deal with it. Right. But it is really hard to beach land a kayak in the surf with gallons of water in it because it does not listen. It doesn't care what you want. It's not listening. So, but yeah, I mean, learning that, getting that time in that seat is very important for those kayaks, especially if you're going to do conditions like bridges, solo bridges at night, offshore, because you're gonna do things people told you should. And
well, there's so many classes that people can take, and I highly suggest taking them if you are in these places. Like, I'm sure you guys have someone in your area that teaches you more about currents. Most of our classes are surf zone and getting back in your kayak, because if you're in the water for too long here, it's a bad situation. But taking those classes, getting those experience. I mean, in our surf zone class, and in some days I put thigh straps in my open deck and I go out to the surf and just get beat up for a while, learn it, feel what happens when you go backwards in a kayak, and learn that these kayaks don't surf. They catch a wave and they capsize. I mean, it's taking those classes, I think, are key, especially if you're in these areas that are known for things like that. And ice need a lot. And even our group KFFB is you're getting people that think that, not that they know everything, but, oh yeah, I'm super comfortable, I'll do all this, blah, blah, blah. Like, I don't need to learn that. But I mean, I've been doing this, I do this for a living, and I'm learning every single time I'm out. I respect the ocean, I respect the water, and, I'm not perfect, I'm learning every time. So, and I think that mentality of having that open mind about it is going to help you a lot too.
Yeah. There was a, what was it? Rob, you may have seen this in New Jersey, or maybe it was the New York side, but I believe it was Raritan Bay this week. Kayak dumped, and that's a strong current where they were. It's the Raritan River, and they got pushed into the bay, I believe, or almost to the bay. It was through the railroad bridge. He could not get back in. Now, let me just put this in full perspective. It is 42-degree water there right now. Ooh. He's over in the water. He could not get back in. Multiple people were trying to get him back in that were also on kayak.
Yeah. He had no PFD. The guy in a kayak threw him his PFD and was trying to get him back in. Yes.
Yeah, the guy put his life at risk. Yeah.
Every spring we get these guys go. They see us out there. They go out and get a new kayak. Go out and fish. Maybe have a PFD on, maybe they don't. The first sunny day, it gets 60 degrees out. The water's still 42. Right. No dry suits, sweatpants, sweatshirt. Let's go party. And
Yep.
Well, every single year.
We teach people, I mean, that, no matter what, we carry safety gear, tow rope, paddle float, pump. And I've never had to use it on mine, but I've had to use it on a lot of other people's kayaks. You should always be prepared to help out other people, because it will happen as a kayak fisherman. You will come across someone that needs your help.
Yeah. I went over, I'm pretty open about it. I went over in the Raritan a couple of years ago, the first unintentional capsize I've had in well over a decade. And I knew it was going to happen. I could tell, and I didn't brace. I didn't pull that paddle. I should have, and that may have helped me, but took a following C and a quartering C at the same time, and a very short period on the waves, and just buried the nose, and the back end went up and over, and lost hundreds and hundreds of dollars worth of stuff. But I was able to self-rescue because I didn't need it, but actually maybe I did. I don't know. I had a paddle float. I kept saying it was in February. It was actually, somebody reminded me, it had to have been in March because I was striped bass fishing. So it was sometime in March 2 years ago. And I was able to get out of there, and I had all this stuff, but I was never nervous because I had practiced self-rescue. I knew I could get back in on my own. I didn't care about the gear. I had some lines tangled on my legs. So I immediately cut those and let those rods and reels sink to the bottom. And I just kind of sat next to it. I said, okay, let's flip this before it fills. Flipped it over, did the paddle float, and I was back in under 2 minutes, probably around a minute. It was probably much faster than it seemed. But you got to be prepared for it. You got to know your kayak, and just because you get it doesn't mean that you can get back into it when you're in the water. So you got to get out there and practice. I think that's something that a lot of people don't talk about, and that's why a lot of people end up dead. I also had on me, in a waterproof case, strapped to me, my cell phone. I had a waterproof radio so that I could call the Coast Guard if I needed it. I had medical stuff if I needed it. I even had a granola bar. Like I'd be floating around eating a granola bar, but I had it anyway, right? So, you got to be prepared for these things, and it doesn't matter what kayak you have. Now, I'm going to say this, and this actually does annoy me when I see it. I have a Native Slayer 12. It's impossible to tip. Look at what's his name, Alexi Figueroa or whoever else on YouTube. He can't even flip his. I can tell you right now, that's an absolute lie. I will bet you my entire house that I can flip any kayak, any standard kayak, without thinking about it in less than 10 seconds.
Because a lot of those
just a shift of weight.
They're in a controlled environment. They're like, look how I can't tip it in my pool. Or this super pond, this super mellow lake with no wind or current surf or anything. Yeah. Look how stable it is. It's the most stable kayak around. Yeah, you're right. You can tip anything.
Yeah, they're standing on the rail.
Gear.
Yeah,
there's no gear. There's no drive. There's no money involved. There's a change of clothes, a towel, and another SD card.
Right.
So, okay, cool. Welcome to the internet.
But they're also experienced, right? They're experienced. They don't even they may not even realize that they are automatically compensating because of the thousands of hours they have in their other kayaks. So when they're leaning, they're not actually leaning and putting their weight over the rail. They're leaning and they're shifting their butt a little bit to the left as they're leaning to the right. So they're actually centering themselves as they do. Right. You can watch them do it. But if you think it can't get tipped, and anyone who says, well, you can't flip a Hobie PA, I can name 10 people that have flipped them accidentally in bad situations. You can flip an Old Town. Yeah, you can. I've done it. You can't flip, whatever, an Ascend, a Native, a Wilderness. Yeah, you can. And I've probably seen them turtle at one point or another over all these years. And I'm sure everybody else here has as well.
Well, it's funny too. Like a lot of these newer kayaks that are sitting higher, like you were talking about earlier, like sitting higher is better for the legs, but the higher you sit, you're more likely to just fall out of the kayak before the kayak actually capsizes.
Before it flips.
Yes. A lot.
I've seen it happen. Yeah. Like, well, will it tip? I'm like, well, you're probably going to slide out of that seat and it's going to be upright and you're going to be in the water.
Yeah.
And then you got to figure out how you're going to climb back into a kayak with 12 inches of freeboard and a rail and rod holders and fish finders in the way.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, that's why I have the entire right side of my kayak. I have nothing on the rail.
Yep.
Nothing.
I don't mount anything on the right-hand side because I'm right-handed. That's where I want to go.
Exactly. I want to go in there, and when I swing, I want to shift over towards my right so that my butt falls into the seat or between the seat and the drive. That's the way that I want it. Oh, and the other thing, keep your drive locked, because if you're in one of these Old Towns and it flips and your drive is not locked, I mean, it's just going to be flopping around in there, and that's a pretty heavy thing to have swinging around when you're flipping that over again.
It also makes it harder to rewrite that to rewrite that boat.
Yeah, you can't hold on to
anything. It's going to extend out. That drive's going to put more pressure against the water every time you try and flip it up because it's just going to swing out and catch that water.
Yeah, it's so easy though when it's locked in place. I can tell you that. Just reach up on it and just lean back, and it just rights itself easily. So, I don't want to go forever. What are some things, Adam, is there anything that you think that we missed as far as choosing a kayak that you think is important to share with people that are looking to go out for the first time?
Yeah, I think one of the things we kind of breezed over, but talk a little bit more about is just hull design. I mean, even on our group on Kayak Fishing for Beginners, I have a huge write-up on, what rocker means or the dual hull or, what all this stuff means. And people have no idea really what it means, what it does. Freeboard, just understanding what all these words mean at least will help you talk to someone that knows what they're doing and ask those questions about what they do. Like the Hobie, not the Hobies, the Old Town, the dual hull, all that stuff. And, it makes sense to me and, just because I've been in the market forever, but I mean, most people have no idea what the hell you're talking about. Oh yeah, dual hull. Yeah. But if you actually ask them, like, what does that mean? They're like, they can't actually tell you. They just hear that dual hull is good and stable.
Right.
They don't know the reasoning behind it. And I think just learning the basics of what all that means, and secondary and primary stability, and all these terms, will help you also choose that kayak. And that also goes into, say, what we said in the beginning of, where are you fishing? What are you fishing for? What's your body type? Do you plan on doing this every week? Do you plan on doing it once a year? I mean, there's just all those little questions that could help you pick that right kayak in the end. But again, demo. I mean, I will push Old Town all day long, but that's because I think they're the best, but they might not be the best for everyone. I mean, everyone has their opinion, and I'm not saying take my word for it. I'm saying go take your own word for it and get yourself in a kayak and go try it out.
Yeah, good points. Ed, what's your thought? Anything we missed?
Time in the seat, demo,
Yep.
try them. I guarantee you, somebody that's really into it would love nothing more than to talk to somebody else about kayak fishing. And oh yeah, let me bring my boat down. We'll go try it out. I mean, you said you and your buddy Rick, y'all just like switched boats. Can you imagine? Yeah, bro, let me drive your truck real quick. You can drive mine to the gas station.
Yeah.
Mine's a beater, and I'm gonna be like, absolutely not. But if you want to try them Outback, let's go. Let's put you in it. Let's go. Yep. So time of the seat, man. Try them out. Try out as many as you can. That response of like, hey, the question? What's the best kayak? We're already starting off. We need to step back. And like Adam reiterated, what are you doing? Where are you at? I'm a very big advocate of 12 foot, around that 12 foot mark for where we're at, because you're going to get some wind. We got a little chops, no big deal. But if you have to paddle, why would you buy something that's not going to paddle? If you want to float around and drift, that's fine. Get something that does that well. But if you have to paddle it, why make it a struggle? Why make it harder on you than it should be? And then again, try it. We don't have hundreds of gallons of water in vinyl on a floor in a building with a ton of product because we thought it would look cool. It's so you can at least get that primary stability and try it. It's 12. It's going to get short real fast. Go rent it. Go try it. You need to get in it and try it before you spend any kind of money. So
right.
Yeah.
Rob?
Well, one thing for me, like some of the decisions even I made with my kayaks is, how are you going to get it there? What are you transporting it in? A pickup truck, a car. I've had a pickup truck, full-size truck. I've had a Subaru Crosstrek. Now I got a mid-size Nissan. But I can fit a 12-footer in there, no problem. But a 14-footer, now I need to get the bed extender. What can you lift? How hard can you lift? When I had my Subaru Crosstrek, I had the Radar 135, which then I had to buy the Yakima racks, the Yakima showboat, so I can pull that back, get it on top of that, to roll it up there.
Right.
It's you got to think of those. How are you going to transport it? Where are you going to transport it? Like for us, we got boat ramps. We can pull them down on the boat ramp, but you're also going to be dragging that thing up and down the concrete all the time, nonstop. Like with our wilderness kayaks, a lot of us have the skid plates on the bottom. They can change out, which is good for me because I go through those things every season. Put a new skid plate in. I know some other kayaks have them too. But I said it's just how you going to kayak. You can either put a trailer on it or what are you going to transport.
Yeah, that's a good point. And when I got my big water, I didn't really think a lot about that. The big water is not light, and I was throwing it on the top of an Altima on the roof rack. That's a pain in the ass. And it only took one time coming down the front of the car, across the hood,
Yep.
and then landing on luckily on the sand for me to say, okay, now I'm getting a truck. So then I went out and bought a truck. So here I go and buy this, $2,500 kayak just out of the box. And then I have to go out and buy a new truck, which I also ended up getting the Nissan. But I needed a bed extender because I wanted the full cab and the short bed. So I cruise around with the bed extender, and it's a good point. It's an important consideration. And I think I'll leave it at this. I will say, I think that this conversation will help a lot of people to consider things that they haven't considered before. But I want to go back to something you said, Adam, and I want to kind of stress it. It's not, I think sometimes people think it's just, I'm just going to go out and buy a kayak today. okay, like you said, maybe if you only have $200 and you want to get something to have fun on, you go out and you buy a $200 kayak, and that's what it is. But if you're going to buy it for fishing and you're serious about it, keep in mind that it is a vehicle. It is an investment. It is a significant amount of money, and it holds significant value in it when you're out there. And I'm not talking about the equipment. I'm talking about you. So you need to make sure that you do some research, understand the terms, understand what primary stability is, understand what the fin drives do versus the prop drives, what type of situation you're going to be in. And you just need to start ticking off. Okay, I'm going to take this con with this pro because of the way that I fish. And it does take research. And if you're going to buy anything just by posting on social media, what should I get? And somebody says, look at the fish I caught, or this is what I've been using, it's the best. You're not as informed as you should be for yourself. You owe it to yourself to do a little bit more research, get those test drives in, and get that time out on the water. And as you mentioned, Ed, people will absolutely let you try their kayaks. They may say, well, wait until I'm unloaded first, or you can take it out before I load up, because they don't want their gear out with you in case you turtle it, but they'll let you do it. You know, I let people get in mine all the time, and it's absolutely fine. And I think it's great, you know, and some people like it. Some people hate it, and that's good, because they're going to end up with one that they like better for having gotten out on the water with it.
Yeah.
So guys, I want to thank all of you for coming on. Really appreciate it. I think that this is going to help a lot of people. To the people in the chat, I want to say sorry. I wasn't able to see everything coming by without Ed, especially on here. Ed, Captain Hank's Tackle Ed, co-host. It's tough to run everything with one person. So did my best. But if you do have questions, I'll try to get back to you with any answers. And if you have a question for any of these guys on screen right now, I'll forward it over and I'll facilitate the answers, or you can feel free to contact them directly. Adam can be found Kayak Fishing for Beginners on Facebook, within the Facebook group. Ed, you're also in that group. Are there any social media contacts you want to put up there for people if they want to reach out to you, or even if they're in your area?
Yeah, if they are, they can definitely reach out to anything with Everything Kayak. So whether it's a contact on the website, Messenger, Instagram, you know, all that kind of stuff. I have my personal page stuff. It's a weird balance for me between the two. But definitely if it's more on the professional side, you know, reach out through any of the platforms for Everything Kayak. It's a great resource. There's a lot going on there. You know, we'll get you the right answer, you know, regardless if you got to get to the right person, we'll get it figured out for you. Other than that, on my personal stuff, it may hang. I checked this email this morning. I'm sure I had it before then. I think I got a friend request that was there for a while, stuff like that. I mean, I tag in when I put stuff, but I don't really advocate through my personal platforms, but it's just for show. It's just the internet.
Gotcha.
Yeah. But yeah, anything through Everything Kayak website or social medias on that platform would be great.
Yeah, I could say that's how I initially reached out to you, and you responded to me within, I think, 15 minutes, and it was at night. So I was like, man, this guy's still working.
I was digging emails and running through some of those, and it pops up. I've been eyeballing messages that have been just rolling through my phone most of this time. So somebody's asking for Hobie drive parts. So imagine that.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
So yeah, but we'll have it and we'll get them set up in 2 days. So, you know, that's what's up.
Awesome. Yeah. Rob, how about you?
At English Angling for Instagram, Facebook, everything's on there. And any questions, reach out. Like I said, I'm getting finished up, getting insurance and stuff for guiding this year. I want to focus more on first timers, getting them out there safe, especially at the beginning of the season, because it's just every year by us, people go out buy the new kayaks and just jump into it and aren't aware of what they should be doing before they're doing it, especially with water temps around us. Yeah,
you got to be careful out there, especially at this time of year. I will say, Rob, I was really happy when I saw that you're going to start guiding. I think that's awesome. I'm thinking about picking up my license this year and decided not to do that. But I think you're gonna be able to show some people some really nice areas and really nice experience out on the water. It's great to hear that you're getting into that this year. So all the best, and hopefully I'm sure I'll see you out there on the water. I've seen you before. Yeah, I've seen you before in the distance, and I've tried to keep my distance. Don't want to
Kinda
be
hard to miss
rolling
out
up on
there.
someone's spot. Yeah. For those that haven't seen, Rob is definitely easy to spot when he's out on the water. So you just take a look at some of his pictures. He stands out in the crowd. So, all right. So everybody, thank you very much for tuning in. Really appreciate it. We're going to put out the announcement for the next live stream. For those that are on Facebook, if you want to watch a replay, this is going to be at some point posted within the Kayak Fishing for Beginners group so that you can take a look at it at any time. In the meantime, this link will continue to work as well, but you don't have to go to YouTube for it. As soon as we get it up there, hopefully within the next couple of days, you can just go into Facebook and into that group, get all the information that you need. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you next week. Get out there on the water, get some tight lines.
See you later.
Later, guys.
Cheers.